Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, as you can tell by the title, I'm going to continue the whole conversation of the whole Sony / Disney / Marvel situation when it comes to the whole Spider-Man thing. Obviously, I made a video before, but that was obviously when a lot of, information was slowly leaking out, so we weren't 100% sure where everything stands. Well, obviously, stuff has come out to be like, yeah, like I think it was like a CEO from Sony Pictures specifically was like, yeah, the door is closed for now. Obviously, for now being the key word in that, but obviously Spider-Man is no longer currently planned to be a part of the MCU no longer. Just couldn't come to agreement. And I brought this up in my last video and I'm reiterating it here. I'm not trying to blame anyone, I'm not going to be like, oh, it's Disney's fault, it's Sony's fault. Like, at the end of the day, it's a business situation. A lot of people kind of said, like, it turned into, like, an ego thing. Whatever the case may be, I'm not trying to blame anyone. I mean, to be fair, it's kind of how business is. It is what it is type of situation. So, for me, as someone who loves Spider-Man, who loves the MCU, I am bummed to hear this because I've loved Spider-Man being part of the MCU. Spider-Man's always been one of my favorite, and now that I've gotten older, I've come to realize is my favorite superhero. So, I'm bummed to see him no longer be a part of the MCU, especially considering the fact is where his story was heading. It took some very interesting turns that, I'm kind of sad we might not see a conclusion to that. Like I said, might, because there is the for now situation, like I said, we have to focus on. Because at the end of the day, like, generally everyone has been in love with Spider-Man being part of the MCU. Obviously people might have their issues with just like his story being too tied to the MCU, which is like a criticism I can get behind. I can understand people's feelings about that. Me, I haven't cared. I guess because we've always seen Spider-Man kind of on its own, at least movie-wise, like him being a part of everything else in the Marvel Universe is cool. But I get it where it's just kind of like Tom Holland's Spider-Man never had a chance to really just be Spider-Man. He kind of got thrown into, Civil War. Yeah, he had his own movie, but he was tied to Tony Stark. Then he was part of Infinity War and Endgame. Like, his story has always been tied to the universe that he's existed. He never just got to be Spider-Man in certain regards. That's how a lot of people kind of view this MCU situation. So that's always been kind of other people's criticism of it. But regardless, even then, those people still kind of like bummed that he won't have these other interactions, because obviously that's played into his story. And that's a conversation I brought up last time that everyone's bringing up. It's like, well, how does Sony plan on continuing? Because the next movie isn't with a new actor. They're not rebooting it. They are continuing it. But his story is so heavily tied to the MCU. His identity got revealed in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So how does Sony necessarily handle that? Will they be able to make reference to other characters? You would assume not, just because that'd be a rights issue, because they don't have rights to the MCU. Because if they did, because that partnership's no longer there, so they can't lend out Spider-Man to the MCU, but the MCU can't lend out any of its story and universe to Sony in the universe that they are pitching, and everything. So I did hear one interesting thought from, I believe it was Coy on Collider Movie Talk a little while back. He brought up something for him. It's kind of that same thing of Spider-Man hasn't really had a chance to just be Spider-Man, that basically take this movie now that Spider-Man's away from the MCU, kind of make it just a purely Spider-Man story, and then eventually, later down the road, fold him back into the MCU. I think that's kind of an interesting thing, because once again, that, like I said, that criticism people had of like, he hasn't just been able to be Spider-Man, especially the way Far From Home ends. It could lend itself to be kind of like, hey, like, maybe he's on the run. I mean, because of this whole thing, it'd be nice if they could, but I wouldn't mind if they use this as an opportunity to set up, like, Kraven the Hunter is hunting him, and he knows who he is. It's like, oh, you're Spider-Man, I'm coming after you. Like I said, it's just a lot of wiggle room. I'm curious to see how they particularly handle this whole situation. But I think that could be pretty neat, because this could also flow back into something we haven't really talked about in the MCU at all, and that's Uncle Ben. Obviously, he's a key part to, Peter's storyline. Obviously, like, the movies haven't really dived into that, but now that he's away from the MCU, that could be something they lean into more, in case they can't talk about Tony Stark, they could always lean back into the Uncle Ben thing. But because it hasn't really been a thing so far, obviously everyone's familiar enough with, Spider-Man's story for that not to be such a foreign thing. But because Tony has been such a heavy part of his life and the story that we come to know, falling back on the Uncle Ben thing might be a little jarring for some people in certain regards. Maybe, I don't know. Like, I think that's one way, that's one potential, like, problem with doing that. But I think it'd be kind of interesting. And then, maybe when he's out there alone, the world's hunting him because they think everything that went down in London was his fault. So now he's thinking back to Uncle Ben, like, what would Uncle Ben do? Like, what Uncle Ben would tell me to do. Like, maybe he kind of falls back into that. Like, maybe dive into, almost like a back to basics Spider-Man, because he can't really be Spider-Man much, because it's like, well, because it doesn't matter, because everyone knows he's Spider-Man, and you know, Peter Parker, like his identity's out there. So the thing is like, well, how do you handle that? How does Peter in particular handle that, you know, both within the universe, but also, like I said, from a writing perspective? Like, I'd be so curious to see what they would ultimately end up doing with the story. So I know a lot of people are kind of like, oh, anti, you know, Sony, I'm not watching anything, I'm not gonna watch your Spider-Man movie, whatever it may be. Me being me, like I said, I'm not trying to choose sides in this situation. I mean, because I'm legitimately interested to see what they're going to do. I'm not going to go like, oh, I hope this fails so he gets back in the MCU. It's like, no, like I'm going to watch it, you know, just because I love Spider-Man and I love to see what they end up doing. And like I said, the key word there, and you know, only thing that keeps, you know, hope with this whole thing is that no matter what happens, maybe even before the next Spider-Man movie comes out, maybe this whole deal would be back on. I mean, because currently there's no slate for the next Spider-Man movie. All we've heard was like Tom Holland, like, you know, whole grateful situation to have this role, and obviously to continue going forward, you know, with Sony and the next adventures for Spider-Man in the third film and everything. So I'm curious, because like I said, there's a whole thing of like, obviously I brought it up before, there's a lot of stuff happening in the public, but at the same time, there's definitely so much more behind the scenes that we as the, you know, general audience will never know or, you know, be in, because there's like so many details to this whole situation. I'm sure we're only getting like a tenth of the actual story. So these are obviously just my thoughts. In the comments down below, I'd love to get to know yours. Where do you stand with this situation? Do you agree with me where it's kind of like the thing of like, you're hopeful that things do work out, but even if they don't, where things stand, you will still watch the, you know, Sony continuation of Spider-Man's story? Or are you one of those people who are like, no, in no shape or form will I do that unless Spidey's back in the MCU? I'd love to get to know your opinions in the comments down below. I'd love to kind of have the discussion with people. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.